preschoolers, I hope you're having a good Monday. So I thought we could read this book today. It's called Yucky Worms, and it's by Vivian French and illustrated by Jessica Alberg. I wonder what the book's going to be about. Ooh. One day when I was in Grandma's garden, Grandma dug up a slimy, slithery, wiggly worm. Yuck! I said. Throw it away. Throw it away? Grandma looked horrified. Would you throw away one of your friends? You can't be friends with a worm, I said. You can't even tell which end is which. But do you remember? There is a way to tell which end is which. Because remember, there's a little band that wraps around the worm, and whatever end it's closest to, that's its head. So you can tell. Yes, you can. Watch. Grandma put the worm down. It gave a kind of squirmy, wriggly, and wiggle and disappeared really fast, pointy end first. As the rounded end vanished, Grandma said, "There goes its tail." I bent down to look, and I could see it had left a tiny little tunnel. "Where did it go?" I asked. "Home," Grandma said. "It's an earthworm. It lives underground." And it says, in most backyards, there will be about 15 worms in every square yard of soil. That's a lot of worms. And down here it said, oh, if you look at this picture, this is what a worm looks like. So this is the inside of it. So see here, if you look closely, this little blue dot is its brain, and here is its mouth, and these are its 5 hearts. Remember, it has 5 hearts. How many hearts do we have again? Do we have 5? Do we have 3? 2? 1? I think we have 1 heart. But what does it eat? Dirt? I wanted to know. It eats tiny, tiny stones and bits of dirt, Grandma told me. But worms eat other things too, like rotting leaves and flowers and fruit and dead insects. They especially like eating it at night when it's cold. The stones and dirt help to grind everything up in the worm's stomach, and then the worm poops it back out. See here it says, worms come above ground to find things to eat. They pull their food back down as they wiggle into the ground again. So you can see that picture? And they're pulling their food back down, back to where they live. Grandma pointed at the flower bed. Look, can you see? I bent down and I saw what looked like a weird long curly worm made of dirt. That's worm poop, Grandma said. It's called a cast. You know when you recycle things? Well, worms do it too. There's still a lot of goodness left in the things a worm eats, and when the goodness comes out again as poop, it helps plants to grow big and strong. And as the worms move around under it and on top of the soil, the poop gets spread around the garden. So we recycle, don't we? We recycle at school and at home. So worms kind of do the same thing. It's kind of like composting. So in composting, we do that when we're done eating food and the leftovers, we put it in a bucket or like a big trash can, and then when it's full, we dump it outside in a composting pile. And what happens is over time, that food breaks down and it becomes dirt again for new plants to grow or for new dirt. So worms kind of do the same thing. It's pretty cool. That's why worms are my friends. Grandma gave me a thumbs up. And it's not just their poop that's good for plants. The tunnels they dig loosen the soil, so roots can stretch out and air and rainwater can get in. Whoa, so look at all of these tunnels. This is what it looks like underground with all the worms wiggling around and making tunnels. And these are all the roots from different plants. That is so cool. But it's dangerous being a worm, Grandma said. Why do you think it's dangerous? Let's find out. I stared at her. Dangerous? I asked. She smiled at me. Lots and lots of animals think worms make the most delicious dinner. Birds love them, and so do moles, badgers, frogs, hedgehogs, and foxes. Even some slugs eat worms, and human beings accidentally slice through them with spades and spike them with forks. It's a tough life. Cutting them in half doesn't hurt them, Grandma, I said. They just turn into two worms and keep on growing. Grandma shook her head. Poor worms. Lots of people think that, but it's not true. She put her fork down. Time for a snack. So, have you ever been in the garden before or helping Mom and Dad garden, and they have this, which is called a fork, or sometimes they have like little pointy shovels, which are called spades. And sometimes you accidentally might hurt a worm or cut them. And I guess even if they're still moving, it doesn't mean that they're not hurt. Grandma had tea and I had orange juice. Can I dig up a worm? I asked. If it rains, Grandma said, the worms will come up on their own. And this says, worms breathe through their skin. They don't mind the soil around them being wet, but if their tunnels are flooded, they can come up to the surface to move around more easily. I took a cookie. What if it doesn't rain? Grandma winked at me. We'll use the watering can to pretend. I finished my cookie as fast as I could. Can we trick the worms now? So what are they gonna do? They're gonna trick the worms by how? How are they gonna trick the worms? Let's find out. Grandma filled the watering can and I watered the ground. Then I stood back. I didn't want worms chewing at my shoes. They only put their heads out, Grandma promised, and it'll be a while before they do. I see how he's tricking them, because remember the grandma said that they come out when it rains? So he's tricking them by pouring water on them, so that way they think it's raining and they come up. Do worms eat shoes? Silly, no. Oh, and here it says, when it's very hot and the soil gets too dry to slither through, a worm will wriggle down to where the soil is still damp, curl up, and wait for rain. When it's very cold, a worm will wriggle down even deeper below the frost level and curl up with other worms for warmth. So that's pretty cool. I didn't know that either. Grandma was right. I had time to eat 2 more cookies before she said, "Look!" "Wow," I said. I could just see the tip of a worm above the ground. Now watch this. Grandma stamped her foot and the worm disappeared. "Did it see you?" I asked. Grandma shook her head. "Worms don't have eyes. They feel vibrations though, and a thump like that might mean a hungry bird is landing. Danger." Grandma dug her fork in the ground. Up came lots of dirt and wriggly worms. She picked one up and washed it in the watering can. "Mustn't drop it," she said. "They can't swim." Grandma put the clean worm on some paper and held it near my ear. I could hear a tiny rustling noise. "What's that?" "They're covered in little bristles," Grandma said. "The bristles and their muscles help them move." And here you can see the little bristles in this drawing. So they have these tiny little hairs and bristles all over their bodies. think we learned that from another book too. And it says, to move, it pushes its front end forward and uses its bristles to hold that end in place while the back catches up. The bristles on the back end keep the worm from sliding backward, while the front end tunnels forward again into the earth. So that's how it moves. That's pretty cool. I've got muscles too. I bent my arm so Grandma could see. If you've got so many muscles, she said, maybe you'd like to help me plant my sunflower seeds. Okay, I agreed, and then I thought of something. When I go to school on Monday, I'm going to say that I've got lots of new friends. Good idea, Grandma said. But, I said, I might not actually say they're worms. Do you have any worm friends? And that is the end. And then here are some ideas to become a wormologist. So, you can look for worm casts in your garden or in the park. Remember what the worm casts are? They're the poop, right? And it says leaves sticking up out of the ground, because remember they pull their food down into the tunnels, and worms on the surface after it rains. You can experiment by watering a dry patch of grass or dirt and watching to see if worms come up, tapping on the ground to see if you can make a worm believe it's raining, carefully digging up a fork full of dirt and counting how many worms you find. A worm in the hand. When you pick up a worm, remember to be respectful. A worm is a living creature. Check how it feels. Is it smooth? Is it slimy? Can you feel the bristles? Watch how it moves. Is it a youngster or an adult? Adults have a clitellum, a yellow ring around their body. Put the worm back on newly dug soil and watch how it wriggles away. Always wash your hands after touching worms. So these are really good ideas that you can use while looking for worms. And I think the clitellum is that ring on the worm. Here, I actually still have my worm, one of my worm drawings from last week. So this little part, this little ring, I guess not all worms have them. Adult worms have those. So if you see a worm that doesn't have it, that means it's not done growing yet. It's not a big worm yet. But yeah, this was our book today. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I will see you guys on Wednesday for our circle time.